clear for takeoff. Once again, welcome to Jets Fuel, the Jets Discourse podcast. As always, I am your party host, Joe Rivera, and along with me, as always, is my astute, educational, incredibly handsome co-host. He's the best dad in the world, none other than Matt Soulard, aka King Sliz. Sliz, say hello, my friend.
What's good, man? It's a scramble, but we're maybe a little running late, but we're right on time for delivering takes.
Listen,
that's all that matters.
We were scheduled for 8 o'clock these past 2 weeks, but we started at 8:30, so we're on time, really, for this week at least. So, so it's been a big shout out to the homies in the chat. You guys are always appreciated. Thank you for joining us from the Discord or wherever you may be listening. Maybe you're listening on a Wednesday morning, but a friendly reminder that we are live on Tuesday nights now. This has been a fun experience so far. It's been a fun experiment as well. What's not a fun experiment, though, Sliz, as we get this ball rolling with the runway rundown. So Dalvin Cook signs on Monday night for a one-year contract, can be worth up to $8.6 million. Before we get into the preseason game versus the Panthers, I want to hit this topic hard while it's still fresh and so we can cleanse our palate of it. Your thoughts on the signing and some of the narratives surrounding the signing. What were your thoughts? What's going through your mind when you see the money? Something we talked about. Running backs still don't matter. You can see from your headline here, your lower third. But some of your thoughts, Liz.
Yeah, man. I mean, I victory lapped way too early. I think it was maybe 3 days ago, tweeting out how it's nice that Jets Twitter as a whole is finally getting on the bandwagon that we don't need Dalvin Cook, that, we don't need a running back, that our running back room was totally fine after that preseason game. Well, I guess not. Right. It's interesting seeing there's a couple guys out in Jets Twitter space and Jets media that have kind of staked their flag. Like, hey, I really don't like this move too much. And they're getting burned at the stakes. And
yep.
I'm one of those guys, right? I'm not in love with this move. It feels like, I think we talked about it maybe in our last episode, for maybe pushing 5 million felt like the range. And I get you're looking to upgrade your RB2 spot, but it's like, man, off the back of all our running backs looking decent, right? And just knowing we're going to have to cut one of them, which at the end of the day, if you cut a Michael Carter or cut a Bam Knight, isn't the end of the world. But man, that price tag is really hard to swallow. And there's so many narratives you see out there, and Fuzzy Stoner from both Reddit and Discord kind of threw out a punch list of things, right? You hear, oh, well, it's not my money. Why do I care what they spend on? It's like, man, this isn't the NBA. This isn't baseball, right? If I'm a Mets fan, Steve Cohen, yeah, burn as much money as you want. I don't care, right? It's a
non-cap sport.
It's a hard cap league. It matters how much you spend on certain acquisitions, right? And in general, we have not gotten guys on a discount. We have not gotten ring chasers on a discount like you expect to get. We've been paying premium, and I'd call this a premium plus type contract, right? We're paying him almost as much as he was going to make in Minnesota before he got cut. He was due to make 10 million. We're going to pay him up to 8.6, right?
Right.
Top 10 running back APY this year, by the way.
Wow.
So the not my money thing, it's just a wrong way to think about it. Rodgers taking a pay cut. It's true he took a pay cut in a significant pay cut that wasn't expected, but that was also something. I don't think this is connected to that at all. First off, the pay cut was largely on future dollars in future years, right? And the cap does roll over from year to year too, right? That's what, and that's another point. Oh, it's just money this year. It's well, overpaying money
not just money this year, right?
Is inherently less money next year, right? Because money not spent would roll in,
right?
But man,
I know it's a lot. It's a lot. It's funny, Sliz. For me, I know you got a few more points here, but
no, you're good.
So I look at this and I'm like, what makes it worse in two parts is, number one, Breece Hall was activated from PUP list on August 15th.
Today.
Yeah. As we record, Wednesday morning for the Wednesday and on listeners. But, 12 hours after they signed Dalvin Cook, Brees Hall seemingly good to go and ramping up, right?
Mhm.
So all of the talk of, well, maybe Brees isn't ready. Well, to be fair, maybe he won't be carrying the rock 30 times in week one, but it just doesn't make sense. Like there wasn't a rush to make this move because you had three guys in front of Brees in the room already on
Hey,
rookie deals.
hey, Joe, you know who else isn't ready to play? Dalvin
Dalvin
Cook.
Cook. That's the second part of this of why this makes no sense is that Dalvin Cook had shoulder surgery, which is his shoulder is essentially well-made brisket from a good barbecue place at this point. You
Yeah,
see those
look up.
videos.
I think it's Draft Sharks. If you go if you just search Dalvin Cook
Yeah.
injury history or whatever, Draft Sharks puts together like injury history on
Mhm.
every fantasy relevant player, right? Which running basically any offensive player,
Right.
dude. Between his two shoulders, I'm surprised he can even lift his arms above his head,
Right.
man. He's had so many injuries.
Yep. Yeah, and it's funny. You ever see those like Instagram reels of like barbecue masters making brisket and they got the knife and then they're like gonna cut it, but then they stop and they just like grab the brisket and it falls apart in their hands instead.
Yep.
That's Dalvin Cook's shoulder right now. So it's
Yeah.
like I just like listen, 1 year, it's a 1 year deal. I don't like look, there's no such thing as a bad 1 year deal, except in a Super Bowl year. And I understand the trade deadline in the NFL isn't quite what it's made out to be, right? But you also should keep yourself flexible and not make a move like this before the season starts, unless it's for an offensive lineman, unless it's to shore up a tackle. But so it doesn't make sense to me why you would do this now. And is Dalvin Cook a good player? Reputation, yes. He's going to be 28, though. And we know what happens to running backs on second contracts, or, I want to say 28 is the year where they really start to decline. So why? I think that's just what I keep coming back to is why. And
And,
why at that price point? Why would Douglas bid against himself to make this move?
and you see it all over Twitter, right? Pick your favorite analytic Twitter guy, right? Every single dude has tweets out right now about showing his decline year over year, whether it's like advanced metrics like rushing yards over expected, whether it's EPA, expected points added, or whether it's just like bare bones yards per touch,
Mhm.
just eye test visual, right? Like running backs decline over time. That's why the running back market has been totally crushed this past year. And this dude is on the tail end of that. There's a reason the Vikings cut him. There's a reason why dudes like even Saquon Barkley are having and Josh Jacobs, who are still in that prime window, are having trouble getting paid these big contracts because these guys fall off.
Right.
And I think Dalvin Cook and I know Nania has it in a couple different spots, right? Michael Nania, shout out.
Our favorite.
Absolutely. But he's shown every stat under the sun shows that Dalvin Cook had a really bad year. And guess what? And people don't want to hear this. Our offensive line is worse than Minnesota's was.
Yep.
And running back efficiency, running back productivity is largely tied to your offensive line. And it's just the reality of it, right? And
Yards per touch last year. I mean to cut you off. Yards per
good.
touch, 4.8 yards per touch, down from 4.9 the year before, down from 5.4, down from 5.5. I mean, that's what you're paying for. I don't get it. Listen, maybe we're thinking about this a bit too much. Maybe, I don't know. It's one of those things that like, okay, running backs aren't getting paid this offseason, and then the Jets and Joe Douglas turn around and pay one when the market for Dalvin Cook wasn't particularly hot to begin with.
Right.
And I
I
think
mean,
that's what gets me too, is like, why would you bid against yourself? Because, okay, Miami was a looming threat or wherever. I don't care about Miami. I like, take your running back. Like, it means nothing to me ultimately. Like, you think I'm sweating that Ezekiel Elliott signed with the Patriots? Like, and another point is, DeAndre Swift signed with the Eagles, and like, you almost feel like that's a deal you would make over a Dalvin Cook trade. All of it, man. It's one move. Like, I don't want to oversell it because I don't think it's the end of the world, but it's a move that to me is like a luxury move when you really didn't have to make a luxury move, and you could have saved that money. It just, I don't get it. It's weird move to me. And the thing is, I thought for sure that we were moving away from Cook, because like the last like week or two, like, yeah, he was at camp, he was at Jets practice, and Salah said, oh, well, he made a believer out of me. And like that really said to me, like, oh, well, maybe they aren't as high on Dalvin Cook as Dalvin Cook is high on getting paid. But then, a week later, he's here. So
yeah, we were both high on him and paid him. But
yeah,
I mean, you brought up there were other running back. Like if we wanted to augment this room with a veteran, there were running backs to be had. Rashad Penny, he basically took a Vetman contract. You mentioned DeAndre Swift, which was a future 4th rounder, but he's a much younger guy, probably untapped potential. Miles Sanders even, and granted that was a longer deal with $13 million guaranteed, but that was $6 million per year, right? At $2 million, at 2 years, $13 million, we're basically in the same ballpark, right? And you're getting a guy that'll be here more than 1 year and probably has more juice than Dalvin has at this point. If you wanted a maybe older vet, Deontay Foreman just had a good year in Carolina. He got paid $2 million, right? I don't know if it was. I mean, I don't think it had anything to do with Zeke Elliott signing to New England. I think that kind of probably was predicated on us being like moving forward with Dalvin Cook, but that number came in higher than I expected to. And it just feels like our all-in push, and we'll get into the all-in push later, but it's just felt like it's been a little disjointed or a little
not quite
underwhelming.
Underwhelming is probably a good
right?
word. Yep.
Where it's like, man, you tune into Good Morning Football, you tune into ESPN. It's like, oh, Jets got a dream team. You have Sean Payton throwing out his comments like, they're winning the offseason. It's like, man,
what exactly
outside of the Rodgers trade, we really haven't like made big splash moves.
Right. Like, what about this is all like the Rodgers trade was like your all-in move if you want to go there, right? But
right.
This is a conversation I was having with a couple of my cousins over the last days. Like, they're talking about cutting Corey Davis, or like, Corey Davis' salary is, there's your offensive lineman, right? But like, if you cut Corey Davis, your room is Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard, and Mecole Hardman. And Garrett Wilson, we all agree, is a superstar in the making. I don't think that's a stretch. Alan Lazard is a fine number 2. He's got chemistry with Rodgers. He knows the system. Okay, whatever. Like, he's not exciting. Mecole Hardman's a fine gadget player. He's your speed threat. Like, he's your guy that's going to be your gadget guy. Pretty hurt all the time. Like, that's not an exciting room, man. Like, it's just not. I mean, and you look around, it's like, yes, the tight ends will probably be heavily involved this year. Tyler Conklin, I'm expecting big things from him this year. Jeremy Ruckert, we already know. Hopefully he's not hurt too bad. But like, what about this team is super team? It's not. It's super team on name recognition. It's super team on Aaron Rodgers being your quarterback. It's not super team in top to bottom talent, at least not on the offensive side of the ball. So I don't get it.
And that's the struggle, right? Like, you would have to think our front office knew that Rodgers' pay cut was coming, right? That was already baked into the equation. I think you kind of saw that with just how we were spending money and how we were pushing future money.
Right.
And you look at contracts handed out throughout the year. You just look at guys that changed team, like a TJ Edwards, right? He basically got the same amount of money Quincy Williams got at linebacker, playing for going from the Eagles to the Bears. That's an addition where it's like, man, why don't we make a guy signing like that, where you're adding a veteran presence, a big upgrade, not just a razor thin marginal upgrade for less than what we just paid Dalvin, right? These are all moves that we could have made earlier in the offseason. Do you maybe close the gap and get an Orlando Brown or any of the tackles that changed teams? There were 3 or 4 big tackles that changed teams: McGlinchey, or Orlando Brown, Jawan Taylor. He went to the Chiefs. And then there are guys that stayed on their same team, right? That it's like, man, looking at the tackle room now, yeah, we probably should have done something early in the season. If we were 3-4 million apart, it's like, man, this money we just spent could have been that 3-4 million. And I didn't want OBJ. I didn't really want DeAndre Hopkins, but those are 2. You were just talking our wide receiver room. okay, if you want to upgrade Corey, wide receiver 2 is an impactful position to upgrade, or wide receiver 3. Like, we're an 11 personnel league. Getting your second and third wide receiver as big boosts is substantial. Closing the gap on that, overpaying OBJ and paying him what Baltimore paid him feels better than paying Dalvin Cook what we just paid him, right?
Yep.
Like, I'd rather OBJ, and then you get the offset of cutting Corey Davis if you wanted to as well, right?
Right.
It's like, I'd rather pay OBJ and bring in Deontay Foreman than do what we just did.
Right.
So,
Sim Sema brings up an interesting point in the chat. That's interesting, but I'd say a little flawed. Once Rodgers said 2 years, he's playing 2 years, my stress about the all-in 1 year push went down. Make the playoffs this year and still have another shot next year. The problem with that is you're essentially going to have to retool some spots next year anyway. And you're going to have to figure out offensive tackle again. And you're going to have to figure out wide receiver. I mean, after Allen Lazard, you're going to have to figure that out again. So it's not exactly like a matter of, okay, well, yes, on the defensive side of the ball, they're young and they're loaded, expecting Jermaine Johnson to take a step, and maybe Will McDonald is good, but Carl Lawson is gone, right? John Franklin Myers will probably be gone. So, like, you're going to have to figure things out around Rodgers anyway. And there's still the chance that Rodgers wakes up one day in February and says, you know what? I really like that darkness retreat, and that was a good time. Maybe I'm just going to hang out in there for the rest of my life. Like, there's a chance, you never know, He said multiple times it's about how his body feels. So you can't look to 2024 and say, okay, well, he's having fun this year and hopefully he's back next year. And to add on top of it, there's also the threat of a decline, right? Like, we don't know what Rodgers is going to be this year, period. We all acknowledge that he had a down year, at least statistically last year. Some of that was because of the wide receivers he was throwing to. Some of that was probably just because of the motivation wasn't there because he doesn't like Green Bay anymore. But we don't know what he's going to be this year at 39 years old, 40 years old later in the season. Like, we just don't. And I think he's going to be good. Everybody says he's good. Practice, he's good. But he's also had injury concerns. He's an aging guy. He's playing behind an offensive line at the tackle spot that's not great. So, I mean, who knows, man? Who knows? So, I don't know. It's there's a lot to unpack here as we get closer to the season. So,
and that's where, and I know we're just ranting on this all-in push, but that's where it feels disjointed. Because I do agree. Like, to me, the 2 year window alleviates like having to get it right, but it's also just where it's like, we drafted with the 2 to 3 year window in mind and kind of sustained success. Some of our signings were more along that nature, but then you get some that are kind of the all-in push nature, like this Dalvin Cook signing, like just how our tackle room is built in general. It makes it tough where it's like, if we were operating on that true 2 year window, it just makes sponging up all this 8.6 million that you could have rolled over the majority of it into next year and made an impact signing next year. It makes it that much tougher to swallow, to offset and mitigate some of the things you alluded to. Cause we have no tackles under contract other than Max Mitchell and Carter Warren. Right. And I don't think that's going to age very well. We don't have we have a couple turnover at key points, and some of that we have pipeline built in with a Joe Tippmann, with Will McDonald, but you have Huff and Lawson free agents. I don't expect Huff to be back. I don't think he would want to be back because we've demoted him to bottom of the edge depth room 2 years in a row now after good production. So, and yeah, like you said, the biggest thing is you just don't know when the quarterback will fall off a cliff, which you saw. Granted, Peyton was the extreme end of that, but it happened a little bit with Brady last year, right? Yeah. Where you saw once that offensive line deteriorated a little bit, they had an injury to Jensen. They had Donovan Smith regressed a little bit. His right guard retired. There's turnover there. Wirfs was still a stud, but yeah, it's hard to sustain success at that high level.
Yep. We'll get more into the all-in push in a little bit in our Discord segment. But before we move on to the preseason game, I do want to give a big shout out to Struggle to Real on Reddit. He's been holding it down for us on the Jets subreddit. That's kind of where my Jets Discord legacy began. on the Jets subreddit when I was still covering Jets camp out there, but he's been a big fan of our podcast. And so we appreciate him. We appreciate everybody who listens. So shout out to Struggle Too Real. Thank you for holding it down for us. And we're glad that you're a part of our little corner of Jets heaven or hell, depending on the day. So Sliz, let's move on to the preseason matchup versus the Panthers. A drubbing. I think that's fair to say. It was a drubbing. Any thoughts?
Feels to be good. It feels good to be on that side of it, right? It felt like a regular season Jets game where we're on the over side. That's what it felt like.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I want to start with the defensive line. These guys were good. And, you know, I kind of wish Jermaine Johnson would stop with the spin moves, but, you know, it kind of worked. You know, it didn't work because he got by the tackle. It worked because the tackle got so freaking confused and he started stumbling backwards. He's like, oh my God, I don't know what to do with my hands. And Jermaine got the pressure and the sack off of that. But any thoughts from this preseason win, Sliz? It was a pretty dominant win in all facets, I'd like to think.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's the obvious stuff, right? Our edge room stacked, and you'd hope with the investment we have there that it is, right? Yeah. And it looks like we're gonna have 3 layers of horses deep, and we're gonna be coming at guys all game, right? That's awesome. The young guys have some juice, they have some moves. Jermaine does look developed over last year in terms of just how he's approaching his pass rush reps, which is a positive. Outside of that, like there's not a ton to take away. I think you can take away flipping to the offensive side of the ball. I thought it was nice seeing us do things in the red zone in terms of still pretty basic personnel, but pretty much all three touchdowns were to tight ends that streaked wide open, right, on misdirection, leaking across against the grain on the formation, all that sort of stuff. I think that bodes well for, you know, when we brought in Hackett, his whole thing was, ignore the Denver thing entirely. He was the guy credited in Green Bay for his red zone packages and a lot of their efficiency in the red zone and converting touchdowns. And you kind of saw a little bit of that at all 3 layers, right? With didn't matter who was at quarterback, who was at the skill positions. We're manufacturing wide open tight ends for really tosses and free touchdowns, which that's nice to see, right? You hope we're down there a lot more this year with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback than we've been in years past. So
I'd like to think so.
Getting down there is step one, and then once you're there, converting, getting 7 and not 3 that's how teams win football games. So that was good to see. And then just in terms of offensive line, and it was good seeing Mekhi take a big step forward, right? It's funny how much can change over the course of a week in training camp. Tippmann continued to look good, but the big story was Mekhi playing really more snaps than I think anyone, and even Saleh said more than he was anticipating.
And he wanted to play more, according to Saleh.
Yeah. Once they went into halftime, I was like, oh, that's it for Mekhi. That was a good showing. And then he came back out at half, and I was like, oh, okay. I thought he looked pretty good. I know obviously he's going to have the big low light of the sack, which,
I don't think that was on him.
I
might be wrong.
I've been trying to watch to almost kind of put the nail in the coffin on Mekhi. Tristan Colon is not good.
That was a bad rep on. Yeah, that was bad.
He is not good at all. That particular play, you see the linebacker kind of shade over the edge. Mekhi thinks he has the linebacker, so then Colon naturally would have to shift over and get the edge. The linebacker bails out. That's part of just the lack of cohesion on the line, not having the communication down. It's hard to really know who screwed it up, right? It's easy to blame Mekhi. It clearly makes a low light when him and Tippmann or him and Colon, whoever it was, were blocking each other instead of the free rusher down the middle. But yeah, all in all, I mean, he's dominant as a run blocker. He was collapsing that side, and that's what you'd expect. So really, he just needs to keep stringing it together. Got a couple first team reps after Max Mitchell had a little back issue in practice here on Tuesday. So he just needs to keep building.
Question here from Spencer. Any roster bubble guys stick out to you, positive or negatively, over the past 2 preseason games? Let's see. I won't say, I'm not sure if he's a roster bubble guy. I'd assume he is, but Zaire Barnes hasn't looked half bad. I feel like he's making a decent he's making a decent run of his snaps, later in games. He's been around the ball a lot. So he's been I don't want to say impressive, but he's been noticeable at least. And I think that's a good thing. That's without looking at his numbers. I'm sure PFF thinks he sucks or whatever, but Salah's kind of always developed that reputation for being able to develop linebackers, right? So if they can get a guy who's even a depth piece with our pretty depleted linebacker core, I think that's a good thing ultimately, right? For a day 3 pick too. So Zaire Barnes has kind of stuck out to me. He looks fast. He looks like he's usually around the ball, and that's a positive. Anybody stick out to you, Sliz?
Yeah, it's weird, and we've been trying to do the roster math a little bit. I know, shout out Prime Numbers put together kind of his initial first blush 53 now that we have Cook, and it's weird. Like, there's a lot of guys on the bubble, but there's not really there's not that many spots for them, if that makes sense. We have like 2 or 3 spots maybe for grabs, but even then there's kind of an obvious pencil in. A lot of it really depends on, are we going to carry 3 quarterbacks? Are we going to carry 6 wide receivers? What are we doing with the running back room? Are we carrying Nick Bawden as a fullback on top of it? I thought Kenny Yeboah has continued to look good as that tight end 4 type option, and he's been a core special teamer for us the past couple of years. And then on top of that, probably the one guy is Gibson, who's been on punt return duty. It feels like if we're going to carry a 6th, he's the lock, and special teams is how those 12 guys make the rosters, right?
Right.
You need. I wish we
got to do something extra.
Yeah, I wish we would cut Justin Hardy, because I think we have plenty of guys that can play gunner while offering more elsewhere, but clearly we're not. We've been holding them out of games. So I think Gibson's the dude that just on his couple punt return touches, he's done well with it, and we need someone to do that. So.
Yep. All right, so this is the last thing I want to touch on before we move on to the Top Gun. Any thoughts on Zach? Because he looked, in a word, competent. Yeah. And it was nice to see, right? Like, the one thing we've always begged from Zach, like from last year to year before, dude, just play within the offense. I sent you a message during the game. It's like, man, Mike LaFleur really was a disaster, huh? If he couldn't get through to Zach, but seemingly, I mean, I know Aaron Rodgers has a lot to say, and Nathaniel Hackett, I think he deserves some credit too, but he was hitting the layups, 14 of 20, 123 yards, a touchdown, was hitting the easy stuff, a couple drops, a couple misses, but like overall a solid day for him. That's encouraging stuff you want to see from your QB2.
Yeah, it's hard to complain too much, right? There's still 1 or 2 throws that's like, yeah, he's still Zach Wilson, right? Where I know one was the out route when we were going left to right, kind of down near the red zone, where he just like sailed it out of bounds. I was like, dude, what was that? And he had one. I think there was one people were nitpicking a little too much when he was throwing kind of the dump off to the flat. He went to throw it. There was an arm in his face.
Oh yeah.
So he kind of changes the arm angle, and those happen. Even the Mahomes and Herberts of the world miss the little dunk passes sometimes. So that one, I'm not sweating that too much. I thought on the touchdown throw, you kind of saw the good and the bad, right? I think you've seen progress like in his play action and how he carries through the play action fake and sells it. But then you kind of saw and you saw him just, hey, I have the arm strength. I can just get it there. And he does kind of like the half jump fade away flutter thing instead of just like stepping through and delivering it, which the guy's open. He's just trying to get it there. I get it. But it's like, man, it's the good and the bad. Like, okay, he's developing with his footwork, with PA fakes, but then you also see it just kind of fall apart. That's another one you can't sweat too much, but you want to just see that progress more and more.
Yeah, he missed. I know there was one throw that he missed that was, I don't know who it was to. I want to say Lazard. Lazard playing? I don't remember. But it was a throw to his left. It was an out route, and it was about 10 yards over his head. But like the timing didn't seem right, so I'm not sure. Again, we could nitpick the tape. It's preseason, but the encouraging thing is that I said it in the first. We'll get to the chat in a second. I said it in the first preseason game. I think you see the footwork looks better. The mechanics look better, right? And that's what you want to see step one, because we said it last year, his base gets too wide. He throws with too much arm, not enough lower half, but there's small steps. So we'll see, man. I mean, listen, that's what you want from your quarterback too. I think the expectations for Zach are, I mean, listen, that's a low bar, right? The bar is on the ground when it comes to Zach Wilson now. So it's nice to see him take a few steps forward, and that's very much good to see. So I'm going to throw this up on the screen real quick. JB shouted out Prime. World peace has been achieved. I mean, I don't know. Listen, man, I have no problem with Prime. I've said it a million times. I don't know. I mean, I said one stupid thing like 4 years ago, and all of a sudden it's like, I hate Prime. I don't hate Prime. It just gets on my nerves sometimes. I think that's the same with everyone. But yeah, I'm fine with Prime, all things considered. Yeah, I don't know. So, is there any other final thoughts on the preseason game before we move on?
We're on the Tampa, baby. No, I think that you want to see us fall into an offensive line, right? And I know that's kind of been the discussion of the week, where you had the AVT news come out where he's been nursing an ankle injury, I guess, for a while. And so they've been wanting to give him some time off here. So he missed the preseason game, has missed practice to start the week. Probably, I'd assume, doesn't play in the joint practice with Tampa. Maybe, hopefully, we see him in the preseason game against Tampa, where preseason 2 feels like, and this is preseason game 2 for the rest of the league, right? It's the just third preseason game, but that's been the kind of the new dress rehearsal game, so to speak. Granted, Rodgers isn't going to play, but it's like we got to figure out what our starting combination is, right? You read the camp tweets, the camp reports. We have like 50 different combinations. We had Tippmann first team, was Switzer playing right guard. I guess we're alternating Tippmann and McGovern now. The right tackle versus left tackle. You had Billy Turner at right tackle today. Mitchell starting at left tackle. So it's like, man, we got to settle into something here. Yep. They said they already wanted to have their best 5 sorted, and we're clearly not there yet.
I think the cope for that is, and I think Salah or Hackett said it recently, they want to be able to, if it hits the fan during the regular season, they want to have guys who are capable of shifting around, right? I'd rather just have 5 guys who are good at their job. That's just me. I don't want to go we're going into the regular season not knowing what's coming or going, man. And that's bad news. I mean, the interior is good because it's not a matter of like, AVT is going to be, if he's healthy, he's going to be your right guard. McGovern will be your starting center. Lakin's going to be your left guard. Like, we know that already, which is good. It's not a matter of, man, these guys all suck and we got to figure out who we're throwing where, right? It's the tackle spot. It's always been the tackle spot. It's always been there. So we'll see. But hopefully we had answers sooner rather than later. But we have plenty of answers, Sliz, along the defensive line, it seems. And that's why this week's Top Gun goes to the defensive line. They showed out versus Carolina, excuse me. Nothing more to be said. Again, Jermaine Johnson, you mentioned it. He's looked sharp. Will McDonald, he's living up to being an Iowa State Cyclone. He's spinning out of his boots all of these spin moves during the preseason, man. He looks pretty good. He's a freak. He needs to put on weight. He needs to get better against the run, but if he's just in there to be a dog and get after the passer, I mean, everybody is pretty much played up to snuff. And we haven't even seen the full complement of rushers, right? You haven't seen Carl Lawson, his second year removed from his Achilles. You haven't seen the full first unit. So
I haven't seen Quinnen Williams.
Trending up.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, you saw Solomon Thomas get in on the action. You saw Quentin Jefferson get in on the action too. Mm-hmm. Both those guys registered a stack. Granted, pretty sure, Joe, that you could have gotten that sack that Sully got, where it looked, again, where I was talking, it was like inverse, where we were finally on the other side of one of these beatdowns, where we ran a stunt where our DN goes inside, Solomon Thomas goes outside. Like, they just didn't block him, man. Mm. He just like ran straight in and gets a free sack.
You take him.
Yeah, I mean, defensive line, we have invested into that unit to be the strength of our team, to connect with the back end with our cornerback room and rec games. So the fact we're getting home, the fact we're beating up on second string, third string guys, that's awesome. That's what you want to see.
Right.
The fact that we're making Frank Reich call team meetings and all that with his offensive unit.
It was like full panic mode after that game too. I forget who
Yeah.
it was. I think it was a Cam Irving or
Yep.
I forget, somebody was like, we need to get our stuff together and we got to figure it out quick. I'm like, oh, well, good. We're putting the fear of God in these teams already. That's
Yeah.
good to see.
That dude got beat by JJ on the spin move and decided, man, it's time we need to have a come to Jesus moment.
All right, before we move on, Sliz, we have a few comments in the chat regarding your attire, because as mentioned, we are live, so people do have the opportunity to see Sliz and myself. Like you see, I got the legacy jersey. I got the Sauce legacy jersey. It's not stitched, but it is what it is. But so we got EE saying, "Hey, love the Sammy Dimes jersey, Sliz." So you got a compliment there. But then we got another one. Foots better get this poor kid in New Jersey. I mean, I'm inclined to agree. It's
True.
time to let go. It's time to let go. You're being very Ant.
I'm
very Ant Rob. You know what I mean?
If Garrett didn't say he was changing his number, I'd probably have a Garrett jersey right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm waiting for the G5. Sammy looked pretty good in San Fran though over the weekend. He looked all right. He looked all right. He looked better than Trey Lance.
Remember, the Jets could have had a first-round pick for Sam Darnold, according to some reports. So it is what it is. I still don't know, believe that or not.
Hey, do we trade for Aaron Rodgers if we #stick with Sam? Or are we making the playoffs organically right now?
Cut it out. All right, so listen, much ado has been made about this year's all-in push, and we spoke about it a bit on the runway rundown, but there's a lot happening here, right? A lot of people have compared the 2023 New York Jets to the 2020 Super Bowl winning Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Obviously, the Tom Brady team. Prime put together a pretty unfavorable, I guess I would say, view of the comparisons between the two. But you talk through it with me again, and we went position by position. We broke it down. Which hired gun team, if you want to go that route, looks better, right? I don't know how to break this down. I think before you get into it, the one thing I want to say is I feel like the potential for the Jets on offense is sky high, because you have Rodgers and you have Garrett Wilson and you have Lazard is, again, he's not a world beating wide receiver, but has the chemistry with Aaron Rodgers, so you don't have to worry about that. You have Tyler Conklin, you have Jeremy Ruckert, and you have CJ Uzama, who I think those three could be good with Rodgers, but you break it down piece by piece, the offensive line is better, period. I think defensively, there's a lot of question marks that could go both ways. So I think you look at this and I'm like, well, the potential is certainly there for the Jets, but as far as track records and reputation go, it certainly goes to the Buccaneers. But your thoughts on the discussion of the all-in moves between the two all-in teams?
Yeah, so I'll say first, right? We didn't get the same discount that Tampa got with Brady going there, right? Brady took a below market deal. Brady's buddies are better than Rodgers' buddies, right? So when you think of Gronk being kind of the cornerstone there, but I mean, I took Prime's chart. I thought his was maybe a little heavy-handed and redid it. That's what's kind of showing up on the left there, and kind of you can go position by position, right? Especially with Cook now, I think our running back room is certainly a lot better than Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones was that year. I know that Antonio Brown is a sticking point, as we discussed it in Discord, but it's like you have to evaluate this going into the season too, right? This was the roster they built going into the season. Yeah, Antonio Brown won AWOL mid-year, so it's probably our wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 and 4 are probably better than the Antonio Brown-less Tampa Bay that year. But you called it out. The biggest difference is really that offensive line and them having a bunch of studs and us not, for lack of a better term, right? And it's funny, right? You think about who Tampa beat in that Super Bowl. They beat the Chiefs, who had injured tackles, and that was the run for your life. Mahomes doing, parallel to the ground throws because he's getting absolutely obliterated by edge rushers. You look at the Cincinnati Bengals against the Rams and their tackle room, right? Like tackles in playoff games make big impacts, right? I think on the defense, it balances out pretty well across the board. I think I have Quinnen over Vita Vea, although Vita Vea is a stud in his own right. I think they're probably a little top heavier across the board, and I do think we have a little bit more depth on them when you look at an edge position, when you look at a wide receiver position, even I guess tight end maybe to a degree, although Gronk is by far the best one in the room, and Cameron Brate wasn't a scrub either, right? He's perfectly competent tight end too. So kind of top to bottom, it's like when you look at it, when you really stack it up, it's like, yeah, that Tampa Bay roster had more juice, and a lot of it was in the offensive trench.
Yeah. And the thing is, I do think that this defense could be something special this year. And listen, a lot of it hinges on what Jermaine Johnson is, period. And a lot of it hinges on if Carl Lawson is going to be that guy 2 years removed. And Carl Lawson has never been a big sack guy. He's always been a big pressure guy. We all know that. The analytics love him. But, maybe I'm a little old school. Maybe I'm a little stupid when I say this, Liz, but I'd like to see a quarterback sacked. Like, period. I understand that a passer rating drops 30 points when a quarterback is pressured. I understand that, but it drops to 0 when he's sacked, So it's like, again, maybe that's stupid of me to say. Maybe that's too old school for me to say, but I want to see them put the quarterback on the ground this year. I think they're going to do it for what it's worth, but the pressure is simply not enough. The pressure is not enough. They gotta get home this year and hurt guys, like not maliciously, but they gotta hurt. We saw it with taking out Teddy Bridgewater in the Dolphins game, right? Like you want to hurt guys. So that's a big part of it too. Is you got to get home.
Yeah, and so you see Milan's comment down the bottom there, and I want to point out a couple things here. So a little sarcastically, we're just like the Tampa Bay Bucks, except with the worst defense, worst tackles, worst guard, worst center, worst QB, worst receivers, and worst coach, right? So a little bit hyperbolic, but I think the last part of that is big, right? Our coaching staff is unproven relative to some of these staffs of previous, right? Certainly not no Andy Reid, certainly not a Bill Belichick at head coach. Bruce Arians, I'd give the edge to him certainly over Saleh. And what wasn't listed there, the AFC this year is way tougher than the NFC was the year that Tom Brady roster made it. And I think that Tom Brady roster was 10-6, right? When in the regular season. So AFC is tough, man. We've heard it all off season. That's where all the good quarterbacks are.
Yeah.
That's where all the talent is. Even within our own division, it's been kind of an arms race of us, Miami, and the Bills all loading up, trying to really make the push. The conference is going to be tough.
Bot lane, do you got to give credit? Woody is going all in.
Woody is going on. He's maybe pushing a little too many buttons, but
I'm not sure. I'm just
Woody's all in, baby.
Yeah. All right, Bot. Thanks for that. Meat pie. We go all in with no offensive tackles. I mean, we have plenty. We have depth, Sliz. We have depth, and the other, like we have so much depth. Listen, I said it on the podcast last week. Depth doesn't matter when the guys suck. Just because their names you recognize doesn't mean that it's good depth. Like, I don't understand. And the other part of it is, how many teams have good offensive lines in football? Like, good offensive lines, right? And I understand, like, building offensive line isn't as simple as like, oh, we draft a guy, you plug him and play. I understand that, but the idea that we have like quality depth, no, we don't. Like, Max Mitchell sucks. Like, Mekhi Becton is another knee injury away from his career being over. Like, I don't understand why people keep hammering this depth thing. Dwayne Brown, we haven't seen him yet in preseason, and he's 137 years old. So, like, listen, man, I throw my hands up because I'm like, I hear this depth conversation. I'm like, I don't see what these people were seeing. I just don't understand. So. Small chimp, overpaying, speaking of Dwayne Brown, overpaying Dwayne Brown going into year 2 of a quarterback because Becton blew up in our faces is different than overpaying in an all-in year.
Yeah, and that one just really speaks to kind of the disjointed strategy a little bit, right? Maybe the lack of foresight specifically at tackle, and just how it's like we've kind of gone into this offseason with our hands shackled a little bit, and we cleared a lot of cap space, but our hands are shackled a little bit because we went so hard in 2021, surrounding Zach with as many pieces as possible, overpaying probably for like a CJ Uzama, Laken Tomlinson, etc. Now we're kind of stuck foot in the bill. It's like those are guys you're not really going to tangibly upgrade, but they're not guys where you're really hanging your hat on those guys being on your roster right now either, right? They're there, and we're paying them probably more than we should be. And those are dollars that could have gone to a tackle upgrade, could have gone to a significant wide receiver too, could have gone to XYZ, right? And yeah.
Yep. So I don't know. And the other part of the conversation that people have been having is the discussion about the 2021 Rams, which, to be honest, I thought that maybe this team was a little bit more parallel to that, but you disagree. And why do you feel that way?
So I like our roster construction much better than the Rams. I think, and I think it's understood, but it's still undersold how much luck actually plays into who wins the Super Bowl, who makes playoff runs, what teams are really peaking at the right time. You look at, and that year was, we heard Bengals model all of the 2022 offseason, right? And those two teams, the Bengals and the Rams, had remarkable health all year, right? And so I threw the roster up there. Yet Darrell Henderson and Robert Woods on offense were the only two guys that significantly missed any time. And you had Cam Akers in the wing for Henderson. And then you instantly replace Robert Woods with a Pro Bowl wide receiver and OBJ for absolutely nothing, right? Like the most fluke fall out of the sky. Like you probably got an upgrade there midseason out of nowhere without even really giving up anything. And then they trade for Von Miller. So they had a good deadline, but it's like, man, they were very much stars and scrubs, and every single one of their stars not only stayed healthy, but performed at or above expectation. So I don't think that Rams model is sustainable, and I've been very vocal and on record. I think that strategy is not good.
Picks.
I think they had a stars align moment in a weak NFC with a ton of health, and it worked. So everyone will say it works, so it doesn't matter. But man, the Rams are going to be bad for a couple of years, right? Like bad. And yeah, they won the ring, so it doesn't matter. But it took a lot of things bouncing the right way. And the Bengals are the same way, right? I think the Bengals missed like 2 combined games from all their skill position players. And that was like 1 from T. Higgins and half a game from Joe Mixon, right? So it's like injury, that pays probably more. It has more impact than people want to believe it has, even though, again, people know injuries and luck play a big part. But it's like, just when you look at these teams that are winning the Super Bowl, it's teams that are super healthy and outlier levels of healthy generally.
Okay, so Sliz, before we move on, I think Fishbird just brought up a really interesting point that I want to pick your brain a little bit on. So the Rams had elite play at elite positions from elite players in the postseason, right? I think that's very fair to say. If you look at the Jets, Aaron Rodgers, if we're going to assume, is an elite player. Garrett Wilson can certainly be an elite player. If you take all of the Jets' defensive edge, all their edge rushers, you probably have 1 elite and a half elite players, right? Quinnen Williams, obviously, I think if he continues to ascend, he'll be an elite player. Sauce Gardner, defensive player of the year, elite player.
I think
what do you think? Like,
I think
the chips are there.
Our roster played. I think if our roster played that Rams roster, we'd have a really good chance. Because I think we have similar elite pieces, maybe not as good. Like Quinnen's not Aaron Donald that year. Sauce, you would like to think is Jalen Ramsey, but it's year 2, right? It's too early to know whether he's consistently that.
Right.
Rodgers, you hope reverts back to more of that MVP form as opposed to what he was last year. So it's like, yeah, we have the pieces. What we're missing, we don't have Andrew Whitworth at left tackle, right? We have a dude that's as old as Andrew Whitworth was, but our dude's coming off a big injury instead of Andrew Whitworth playing like an absolute stud, right? So that's the one spot, and we don't. you want Jermaine Johnson, you want one of these edge guys to be that guy that dictates protection. I don't think we have that yet, and we make up for it in numbers, which is okay. But yeah, you don't have that guy where it's 3rd and 8 and we need to get a stop. I don't quite trust our guys to get home yet.
This is Bryce Huff erasure is what this is. I don't appreciate that.
A little
I don't
bit.
appreciate that. All right, so let's move on to this week's Geek of the Week. And it's not much of a secret if you listen to this opening segment, the Runway Rundown on this program. Joe Douglas, general manager of your New York Football Jets. Ooh, buddy. I mean, we've been pretty critical of Douglas. I think we've also been pretty fair of Douglas, right? He's had some hits in some spots. You say he wins the waiver wire pretty regularly, which is fair. The offensive line, he's poured tons of resources into it and still tons of question marks, right? So it's like adding Dalvin Cook on this contract, and listen, it's 1 year. It's 1 year, and if Breece Hall gets back and he gets back to form quick, ultimately you're okay, right? Like you're okay, you feel okay about it because he'll just kind of fade off into the background. Running back to Michael Carter's your change of pace back. Bam Knight is bagging groceries or on the practice squad or something, right? So, but it still feels, and I said this a couple times, it feels like Douglas was bidding against himself. And you've said multiple times on this podcast, you've said in the Discord, it always feels like Douglas loses on the edges, right? He loses on the margins. And this is another case. So really not much of a surprise to say that Joe Douglas is this week's Geek of the Week.
Yeah, no gold Joe, no hollow Joe, no woolen Joe. This is straight wood, straight pure pine wood. And I mean, you said it right, and I know all lots
this
of Jets
is straight
fans
wood.
Like,
yeah, I can't.
It's a running back. We're all in. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. It is in the big picture. It's inconsequential for the most part, right? He's probably an upgrade to running back too. I really don't think he matters at all relative to what we had. But it's like if this was 4 million, 5 million, it's like, okay, whatever, right? We upgrade, you move on. But it's like, man, how did we get to 8.6 million?
Right.
Like, I just don't understand
right.
how we got to this point, right?
And the thing is, when I saw 8.6, I'm like, oh, well, they gave him like a $4 million guarantee or a $5 million guarantee and tag on like $3 million of phony money, right? Monopoly money. But then you hear it's like a $7 million base and like 1.6 in incentives. Like, what are the incentives? Like, I don't know.
So Fuzzy did a little research, and this is the second largest APY contract to a running back in August since, I think he said 2016. Marshawn Lynch with Seattle. I think that was an extension. And then another podcast I listened to is the NFL draft dudes, right? And Kyle Krabs, who does Locked On Dolphins, did some research on the running back market in the wake of this whole running back don't matter epidemic. If you're a running back fan, and since 2014, so the past decade, the two largest APY running back contracts: number one, Le'Veon Bell; number two, Dalvin Cook. And these are running backs that change teams, right? So guys that are re-upping their own guys, they're re-upping their own guys because they're good. Guys that are it's more speaking to the guys that are hitting the market. The Jets for some reason are paying top dollar, and I'll leave it at let's hope it ages better than Le'Veon Bell.
Yep. Interesting from I Step on Midgets here. JD signed Chester Rat. So I don't know.
Waiver claim, baby.
Yep.
Joe Douglas on the waivers is a different beast. He is an animal on waivers. If Joe Douglas did nothing but waiver claims, we would have a team of all pros.
There's another one. Anthony Licciardi. Douglas is just pro labor and wanted to make sure at least one running back got their bag. Why did it have to be us though, man?
Yeah,
Might
this
have
is
to be a
this
thing.
is the long game to correct the running back market, so everyone else pays, and then just in time, we'll end up giving Brees this massive bag just for him to hit his 5-year regression and fall
Yep.
off a cliff.
Love to see it. Love to see it, Sliz. You just love to see it, right? All right, so let's move on. This is the flight plan. All right, so this preseason week 3 versus the Buccaneers. I don't think anybody's expecting much of anything from the Buccaneers this year. I'm expecting Todd Bowles to be filing for unemployment at some point between now and the start of 2024. What do you? There's only one joint practice this week, so we're really not going to learn much either way. Saleh said that that he wants to keep guys safe, he wants to keep them healthy, which is why they canceled one. Which is like, then why even have a joint practice? Like, why go through the rigmarole? Like, what's the point? So
I wonder if we would have done that if we weren't having the issues on the O-line that we've
right,
had, right?
yeah,
Where you have really 3 of the guys that you'd want to be your top guys in Dwayne Brown, AVT, and Mekhi Becton, all in limbo. I'll say in limbo.
right.
So
What are we expecting from this upcoming preseason game? Is there? I mean, who's going to play? Who's going to play what? I don't. What position battles are left? I don't really. It feels like the roster's mostly solidified, right? Like,
you just need whatever to sort itself out on the offensive line is the big thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I expect most players to play. Hopefully you get AVT out there at least for a little bit to get some, especially if we're starting Tippmann. Like if that's the leap we're finally making this year to have Tippmann kind of crack the starting lineup, you want him working alongside AVT, getting a little bit of that communication down.
Right.
All in all, you hope that we crush the Bucs like we crushed Carolina, right? Maybe
Leave
not
no doubt.
that big of a blowout, but it's
right.
a team that is a little bit gutless, punchless now. They still have some good players at a couple spots. They still have a Vita Vea. They still have a Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, but they're arrow pointing down. They should be in the 1.0 race for a Caleb Williams or a Drake May. Yeah, we should do what we did to Carolina and show we are a Super Bowl contender and you are not.
I want to be careful how I say this. I almost feel bad for Todd Bowles. I mean, I don't, because like what we saw from the Buccaneers last year is what we saw with the Jets, right? It's like I don't like to be the I hate the national media guy, but like tons of people in the national media were like, oh, well, Jets fans are stupid. They don't know, Todd Bowles is a great coach. Like he's a good man, like this and that. Like
it was the Jets' fault.
The Jets just fault.
Yeah.
And listen, to be fair, Mike McCagnon was a disaster, right? Like the rosters were bad, but part of Bruce Arians leaving and appointing him, Bowles' heir apparent, was he didn't want to leave him with a bad job, right? That's what he said. And listen, Bowles inherited a pretty talented roster. He inherited Tom Brady, like good team last year. But you saw it. Like at times it just looked like they were sleepwalking. Like there was no fire, there was no anything. And you always hear in the NFL, the team takes on the personality of the coach is usually the way it goes, right? So seeing a little bit sleepiness from Todd, and the numbers don't look good for him moving forward. I don't think he'll have a job after this year. And a particularly weak NFC South, like it's nothing about that division is scaring you really.
It blew my mind, their offensive regression, right? We were having a argument about where Green Bay stacked up and as an offense last year, and took a rabbit hole down into the points scored last year. Tampa Bay was bottom 10 points scored with a still pretty good looking Tom Brady, right? And yeah, that team was lifeless. You got all the classic Todd Bowles clock management, punt versus go for it decision making. Not great.
Glad that's over, I guess we should say. All right, so let's bring it in for a landing. This is the landing strip. What's on your mind, my friend? It's been busy. It's been
fantasy football, busy. Man.
You
don't partake, right?
I don't do the fantasy, man. I played fantasy football once. I auto drafted because my laptop sucked and it wouldn't let me draft.
You're that guy.
It's just not for me, man. It's just not for me. I just
That's all right.
I don't know. Maybe I'll get into it. It's just like it's another thing I got to worry about. I got to do the rosters. I got to, it's just not for me. Not for me.
That's all right.
You're in like 10 leagues, though, right?
I think I'm in 5 this year, but so with Judd's Discord, we had to sign up. We have, I think it'll be 6 full redraft leagues, all with unique players. So that's 72 Jets Cordies in 12-man leagues. Then we have we just did a startup for our 3rd dynasty league with mostly unique players, and then we have a best ball league. So man, Jets Discord is popping with fantasy leagues, and it's that time. That's that time of year where the drafts are popping, and best of luck to you all. Those who partake, best of luck.
Yeah, I don't know.
And sorry for the early drafters that drafted either Dalvin Cook or Brees.
Yeah, and Ramondre Stevenson too.
Yeah, or Ramondre. Yeah, he's gonna get vultured by a fat Zeke.
I don't know, man. I can't do the fantasy. It's hard for me to pay attention to everything going on. I think that's part of it. I just like having to root for certain players, like to play well against my team if they're out of my fantasy. Like I can't do that,
Yeah,
I'm a little bit of an old head in that way.
Feels a little bit dirty rooting against the Jets every now and then because you want your player to do well.
Yeah, I can't do it.
It was easier in the tank years when we sucked. This year, it's supposed to be good. It'll be tough.
Right. You can't do it. So as mentioned on the podcast last week, I built this fancy computer, and I've been really starting to get into the PC gaming, man. I've been playing Counter-Strike. I know I'm like the last one on the bus when it comes to Counter-Strike, but I've been playing Counter-Strike ahead of Counter-Strike 2 coming out, and man, it's addictive. Let me tell you, this game is freaking addictive, and I understand why. I get it, PC gamers are just a different breed, though. I had one guy in a lobby who was just like, he just kept singing the same opening word to Firework by Katy Perry. Like the same, like, did you ever feel like a plastic bag? Like he just kept singing over and over. I'm like, dude, what is wrong with you? Like these PC dudes are weird, man. They just got like, after console gaming online for years, it's like, I thought I was used to it, but no, these guys are strange. I mean, I suck too at Counter-Strike. So that's the other part of it. But PC gaming, man. Who knew? What a secret.
Oh yeah. Oh, I've known. I've been a PC gamer my whole life, man.
Have you played Baldur's Gate 3 yet? Because that's the big one.
Dude, I don't have time for that. That's the problem is like I feel like there's a lot of games I want to play. A lot of them are like those big sprawling RPG type games. It would take me a year to like in little hour snippets each night. It's tough.
That was kind of me with Legend of Zelda came out, the new one, Tears of the Kingdom, and I'm like, I'm gonna start it when I'm on paternity leave because I'll like the baby's sleeping all the time, and like I'll be, and then I just didn't.
Yeah,
like I played like 10 hours of it, and then it's just been kind of sitting there, and now I'm like, oh, my wife wants to spend time with me, and the baby's sleeping, and like
now you're putting in 8 hours of CS:GO every night. And...
I'm getting it in when I can. Like he goes down for a little 45-minute nap that's good for like one round of Counter-Strike, and then it's like I get lathered up and I get in the groove, and all of a sudden it's like, oh well, he's screaming again, man. What the hell? But I wouldn't trade that for the world. So.
You just need to play more, man. Just need to play more.
I'll just sit him on my lap next time is what I'll do. I'll just have him on the keys. I'll have him on the mouse and I'll be on the keys. We'll see how it works out. All right, Sliz. So as we do, we are going to introduce our preseason contest of which you can win one Jets jersey of your choosing. Jersey, that is, not jersey. One Jets jersey, because we don't have money in the budget for this, but
including Chasserette, I think. Do they have custom ones?
I don't know
because they definitely don't carry that big line.
But all right, so here's this year's contest. Last time we did a contest, we did a name a unit of the Jets contest, which is pretty cool. But this year it's going to be a little bit different. I take inspiration from a wrestling podcast that I listen to, and they often do limerick contests. And if you're unfamiliar with the limerick, think there once was a man from Nantucket. So for this contest, put together an original limerick about the Jets, and you'll enter yourself in a chance to win a jersey. So I'll give you an example. This one is, a little tangentially related, but here goes my example so you guys get an idea. There once was a QB named Justin, with whom lots of Jets fans were lusting. Good thing he's real fast since his game is all ass, and soon his first name will be Bustin'. So there you go.
There we go.
So, you know, a little
I
poetry.
dig that.
You know, so yeah, just put together a limerick. We'll open up a thread on Discord, or you can email it to us, or get it to us how you please, and we'll read them on the air after. And the deadline will be before the start of the show next Tuesday, so you have a week to get it in, and winner will be randomly selected of which ones we like the most. So, get involved, man. Jetscourt is fun, and you're a poet and you don't even know it. So, a lot of fun to be had this upcoming season. A lot of fun.
Oh yeah.
But
hopefully a lot of fun.
Hopefully a lot of fun.
I don't know that Aaron Rodgers calf cramp into 7 straight incompletions or whatever.
Yep.
Didn't feel great.
Was it the same? Do we know if it was the same calf that he hurt earlier in the preseason?
They said it was the other one.
All right.
I think I saw that.
The funny thing is I was looking at his calves recently and I'm like, he's got some pretty built calf muscles. So it's a little weird, but it is what it is. Anyway, that'll do it for this episode of Jet Fuel, the Jets Discord podcast. Obviously, you already found us, but you can continue to find us on SoundCloud, Spotify, Pandora, and Apple Podcasts. Please leave a 5-star review where applicable. It really helps us with something. Obviously, we're now available on YouTube, and we're live on Tuesday nights at youtube.com/@JetFuelPodcast. Please join in the chat. We've obviously been having a lot of fun doing this. Please subscribe to our channel as well if you haven't. You can find us on Twitter @JetFuelPodcast. You can find me on Twitter @JoeRiveraSN. Sliz, where can the people find you on Twitter?
Yep, @Sliz_NYJ.
As always, you can send us an email at jetfueldiscordpodcast@gmail.com and join the Discord. Sliz, how can the people join the Discord?
Discord.gg/NYJets. Come celebrate, live on every snap with your fellow Jets fans. Either we're back or it's over.
Yep.
Press the button.
I just realized we didn't do Hard Knocks. We didn't do the Hard Knocks review for this week. Any quick thoughts on Hard Knocks before we log off here? Did you watch?
Hard Knocks cleared One Jets drive so hard it's not even funny, man.
Yeah, One Jets drive.
Hard Knocks was good. Hard Knocks was good.
One Jets drive has fallen off quite a bit, and Hard Knocks is not what it used to be, but it was an enjoyable watch. I'll say that.
It's good. It's good to turn your brain off and get hyped for the season. Content.
Right. That's about it. Yeah. I wonder, I'm curious if the One Jets drive people were told hey, we got to save some content for HBO. I'd be curious, but it was, Hard Knocks 1, One Jets drive 0. So
hey, I'm looking forward to some more Sala Wordsmith in episode 2, man.
Crows, Eagles.
They started off with some classic Wordsmith action, man.
Crows, Eagles. He's a weirdo sometimes, man.
Are we allowed to fade out on the Hall of Fame game ratings clearing the average of the NBA playoffs?
We can. NBA is a dead product. I'll go there.
NFL zombies show up for their sport, man.
It's true. Hey, I was watching, so
well, of course.
And hopefully you will be watching, fair viewer, on the next edition of the Jet Fuel Jets Discord podcast. For Matt Szilard, I am Joe Rivera, reminding you can't take flight without jet fuel.